Let's speak to John McDonnell, former Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer. John McDonnell, afternoon to you. Has he done what it takes to support business and people?
No. It's disappointing. The rhetoric sounded pretty good, but go behind the reality, it's not looking good. I always say, the bigger the applause on the day, the bigger the disappointment by the weekend. I think there's already quite a bit of disappointing. On the income tax side, let's go through them just for ordinary working people. Let's just take that perspective.
Sure.
They'll be hit by an income tax rise as the thresholds are frozen. They'll be hit by a council tax rise. I was hoping he was going to knock that one out, but he hasn't. There's going to be a pay freeze for the public sector workers. So austerity is back for most of them. And then you have the cliff edge cut in universal credit in a few months down the line. And I was really disappointed. I thought we'd convinced him about legacy benefits. These are largely disabled people who never even got the additional £20. There was no mention of them, so they will be excluded from it all. And we've been campaigning since last April, actually, when he announced the furlough scheme, which was one of my ideas. I said then I was worried about the number of people who were excluded from the small business support and the self-employed support and the furlough. And the calculation is about 3 billion, a lot of them freelancers, people like that. He's included 600,000 is the calculation he made today. But actually that leaves about another 2 million still excluded for any forms of support. So just from an ordinary working people's perspective, although there was big announcements around support for businesses, etc., there wasn't an awful lot to lift people out of the immediate problems that they're facing. And I have to say also, he said, I thought he was going to do something around rental debt as well, because we're finding, if you're a constituency MP like me in my community where I live, we're facing a housing crisis with high levels of rental debt that have built up over the pandemic and mortgage debt. I was hoping he was going to do something on that, but he didn't. So from just an ordinary person's perspective, big noise, lots of announcements, are actually not an awful lot of assistance.
But he's extending furlough, John, till September. This is costing billions of pounds. I mean, no chancellor has ever looked after working people in this way, you could argue.
Well, because we're in a crisis, you have to. There's no other option. But the problem.
Well, he could have stopped it sooner, couldn't he? He could have said it's only going to July.
He tried to do that, and he wouldn't have politically survived. You know that, because look at what happened last year when he tried to pull back from it and get employers to pay more. He misjudged it completely, and we were getting job losses announced in advance of the date for when he's set to change the scheme, and he had to pull back. But I think he may have to do that this time as well. My view of the furlough scheme is actually the problem is that two things, really. I think he should have made this decision ages ago, and he could have done. I'm disappointed in him because I think he's played a lot of politics with this. He could have made the announcements about extending furlough and universal credit a couple of months ago, and it would have relieved people from an awful lot of stress that they've been under. But also on the furlough scheme, as soon as you start unwinding that, I think we are going to be facing job losses. And I'd rather he extended the furlough for a longer period of time. I know that costs more, but at the end of the day, it's better to keep people employed, fit to get back into work quickly than have job losses overall. And also, you need to ensure that you are investing in the economy overall, particularly with regard to, the infrastructure projects, tackling climate change, etc. Everything he said today isn't on the scale needed. So, yeah, I'm pretty disappointed, really.
I looked at this, John, and I had a slightly different take in some respects, because I think he's nicked your little red book, because there are some things, there are some moments.
It's the rhetoric, Ian. It's not the substance.
No, I do understand that.
Some of the ideas. Look, he's nicked a number of my ideas.
Increasing corporation tax.
Oh well, listen. I think I should. Someone said I should do it for plagiarism, but he's nicked the ideas, but it's rhetoric, not substance. So on corporation tax, I was putting forward a steady increase over a 3-year period to ensure that the corporations paid their way. He's introduced an increase, but if you look alongside that, he's got huge, big tax giveaways to them. This loss proposal tax giveaway. He's even reviewing the bank surcharge that the Tories introduced, and I supported it, to actually tax the banks who'd caused the economic crisis in 2007, 2008. So I think the corporation tax increase, actually, it looks more rhetoric than substance because of all the other giveaways he's given.
But he's also got he's got the National Infrastructure Bank there, the Treasury HQ in the north. Yeah,
let me just do with the National Infrastructure Bank. I put forward the National Investment Bank. Actually, Ed Miliband had a similar proposal.
I think he did, yes.
We were modelling it on the German proposal, and elsewhere it's happened. He's given it next to nothing in terms of capitalisation, so it will not meet the challenge that's needed. He's done stuff about, like moving some jobs out of London, the Treasury and whatever. I was going to move parts of the Bank of England as well. But again, it just looks like rhetoric rather than substance. And you have to see how these things are laid out.
But if he does it, you'd give it the thumbs up, right? You're suspicious it might not happen.
You've got to do it on a scale, and you've got to do it properly. And if you don't capitalise the bank sufficiently in the first instance, it won't work. And you've got to ensure. And I just give this example. You take the furlough scheme as an example. I urged him to introduce the furlough scheme. He introduces it, but it puts no conditions alongside it. So what's happened in my constituency and a number of other areas? Companies have taken the money, and then they've done a fire and rehire job where they sack people, only take them back on when they cut their wages or undermine their conditions. And I said to him from the beginning, if you introduce my scheme, you've got to put conditions attached to this. And what I find with Rishi Sunak is, and this is the disappointing thing really, time after time, even though I might have convinced him about a particular policy, he never really, he has to be dragged kicking and screaming. It's like drawing teeth for him to actually address it properly. It's like the excluded, last April, we raised the issue of the numbers that were excluded from any support whatsoever. And he's taken this long just to include some back into the schemes themselves. It was the same with the banking loans. He's raised the issue today around the bounce back loans. Last July, I put parliamentary questions down and said, you've got to examine the probity of these because actually there's a large amount of fraud being evidenced. The National Audit Office said that as well. Today's announced some investment in terms of investigation of fraud. We're talking about 6-7 months later. Why does he sort of stumbles from one thing to another? And the point I was trying to get across to him as much as I could in recent weeks is you need a stable long-term plan so people know where we're going. You can't keep on stumbling from one crisis to another.
He would say this was a stable long-term plan. Let me ask you, John, you're a lifelong socialist. It would be extraordinary if you were going to endorse all that a Conservative Chancellor said. Was there anything in there that you thought Rishi Sunak's got this right?
No, I'm sorry, there wasn't. I was hoping that on the green investment.
Yep.
I thought, when he started speaking, I thought, is there a breakthrough here? Because I had all those plans for the investment bank. I had a Green New Deal, the Green Industrial Revolution. I even had the plans of where the individual sites, for example, for wave barriers would go, where the new battery plants would go, etc. None of that. And what I found, and again, this is the thing that gets you sometimes, a lot of re-announcements of things he's already announced, but we've seen no delivery on. And Keir Starmer raised one point, which I thought actually was critical, even on the young Jobs for Youngsters scheme, the Kickstart scheme, which actually Gordon Brown had one years ago after the banking crash. He put that forward. And we thought at least the government's going to take that up and all the rest. They announced, 250,000 young people to be helped. Keir raised today, it's 2,000 people so far. It's just not good enough in terms of delivery. You can't live off rhetoric. And I think Rishi Sunak, I was a bit sarky, but I meant it really. I think he was more interested in his social media plan than an economic plan for the country. And I just think he lacks the substance and too much rhetoric today rather than substance.
Just a final point. I'm bound to ask you, John, how do you think Keir Starmer is doing? We've heard his response to the budget, but overall, is he better than the last bloke?
I was Jeremy Corbyn's shadow chancellor. Of course, I'll support Jeremy, and I wish we were in government now because I think we'd be doing a better job. And the policy statements or rhetoric that Rishi Sunak has stolen off us today, we'd actually make them just statements or rhetoric, but a reality. I thought Keir's response today was very good. It's a tough act this is the toughest act in Parliament, actually, because you don't know what's coming. You've only got minutes to prepare. So I thought his response today was good. He's good on the floor of the House of Commons in statements like this, and I thought he did well.
John, thank you. John McDonnell, former Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, with us here on Talk Radio. You can respond to what you heard John say there. He never disappoints, and I don't know whether he can claim the furlough scheme solely as his own. I did wonder, with John McDonnell, you kind of have to just sit back a little bit and listen to the questions or the answers open up themselves. He was giving Rishi Sunak nothing. He claimed the accolade for all the things he did agree with, but said Rishi didn't do it as well as he would have done it anyway. Thoughts on that? 0344 499 1000. You're listening to Ian Collins on Talk Radio. We'll take your comments on the bigger question. Has Rishi Sunak played a blinder, or do you concur with John McDonnell? Have you found yourself in that rare place as somebody who might not have voted for the Corbyn team back then, that actually he's on the money and not the current Chancellor?